Wonderful to see you all, and delighted to be here to talk today about the topic of abortion. It's obviously a very big topic, and there's all sorts of things that we could discuss related to the topic of abortion. Of course, abortion involves a woman contracting some kind of doctor to kill the child in her womb. And this is a horrific evil. It not only marks our society, our nation, it has marked other societies and nations all throughout the history of the world. Of course, we have in the Bible the worship of Moloch involved offering up children to this false god. And we have to see it in those kinds of terms. We're Christians. We know that there's something horrifically evil going on in this practice. We want it eradicated from our land. We know that there's something spiritual going on in this practice. It's not merely a matter of science and biology. It's not merely a matter of politics, although it manifestly is a matter of politics. But it's a matter of terrible ideas and those who reject the Christian faith wandering off into darkness and suffering the fruit of their rebellion against God. So I want to have a particular approach today, highlighting the different things that could be talked about. Of course, when it comes to eradicating abortion in our land, we could talk about the centrality of worship to that end, that the worship of the living God is actually what results in a blessing on your land. We know that the sin of the Amorites is not yet complete, is a phrase we hear in the Bible, that actually sin is being built up in a land, and eventually once that sin had reached a tipping point, God eradicated those people and brought Israel out of the land of Egypt. We know that kind of thing happens in our land today. If abortion is going to stay around, we're going to be in great trouble. But the worship of the triune God actually pushes that kind of thing back. We could talk about prayer, actually just asking the Lord to have mercy upon us, asking the Lord to change people's hearts and minds. That's a way that we can go about eradicating this evil. There, of course, is the political route. And Roe v. Wade was overturned, and of course that has not ended abortion in our land. We're grateful for that Supreme Court decision that has abolished Roe, but people can still go about this in their states, and they very much are doing so. That's evident right here in Idaho, as women would go over to Washington, where it's far easier to get an abortion over there. There are various mercy ministries, a couple of them like Palouse Care Network or Tiny Heartbeats. You might have heard of these organizations. People approaching it in different ways, not so much in the political realm, but talking to people on the street, talking to students, letting them know about what's going on with abortion in our land. All of these are various ways we could go about eradicating abortion. I want to talk to you today about dealing with the nasty ideas that fuel abortion, particularly two of them, and that is going to be autonomy and equality of the sexes. Autonomy and equality of the sexes. Now, these ideas might surprise people. You say that they're actually fueling abortion. You are Christians. Your job is to eradicate those two bad ideas, which I see as, you could call them pillars of abortion or the fuel for abortion. If we can eradicate those ideas and put in their place the right kind of thinking and living, and show people the goodness of not living an autonomous life or attempting to do so, and eradicating the equality sexes for actually the beauty of what it means to be a man and a woman, then we're going to be working at those very pillars that are upholding this horrific evil in our land. So, I want to begin by dealing with the autonomy part, and really they're interrelated. Autonomy and equality of the sexes both find expression in a statement from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, show of hands if you know who Ruth Bader Ginsburg was. Very nice. Somebody who has a hand up, tell me who she was.
Wasn't she the Supreme Justice that passed it?
Yes, she was a Supreme Court Justice. She has now died, but she was certainly on the left, and she was a huge advocate for things that we would stand against as Christians. She was writing an article in the North Carolina Law Review about abortion back in 1985. And I'm going to read you her entire quote to show you how the idea of autonomy and the idea of equality of the sexes was informing her and supporting her in her advocacy for abortion. This is what she wrote. I appreciate the intense divisions of opinion on the moral question and recognize that abortion today cannot fairly be described as nothing more than birth control delayed. Now, what does she mean by that? Of course, birth control would be saying we're going to have some kind of planning, some kind of birth control employed so that that we're spacing out how many children we're going to have. But birth control is something that would prevent a woman getting pregnant. Abortion is killing the child that is in the womb of the pregnant woman. So would you call abortion birth control delayed? It's just delayed birth control. That was the idea. That's what people were trying to say. And of course, anybody that has his right mind would say that's not what it is. Birth control is preventing a woman becoming pregnant, and abortion is killing the child in the womb of a pregnant woman. What's striking here is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is acknowledging that in her statement. She is saying, I understand that we have a moral problem, that abortion is a moral question, because we can't say that abortion is simply birth control delayed. There, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's an advocate for abortion, is saying that there is a real human that is being killed when we go about this particular practice. So again, I appreciate the intense divisions of opinion on the moral question and recognize that abortion today cannot fairly be described as nothing more than birth control delayed. The conflict, however, is not simply one between a fetus's interests and a woman's interests, the fetus being the child. Now, pay careful attention to what she's saying. She's saying in abortion, there's a conflict between the interest of the child in the woman's womb and the woman herself and her interests. There's a conflict. She's flat admitting that the woman wants to, say, go to college, but she won't be able to if she has a child, the child in her womb. The woman wants to buy a vehicle, but she won't be able to. And thus, she's at war, at conflict, according to her, with the interests of the child in her womb. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is acknowledging that there is a conflict there between her interests and the child's interests. But she says there's actually more going on, and then she explains that. Also in the balance is a woman's autonomous charge of her full life's course. As Professor Karst put it, her ability to stand in relation to man, society, and the state as an independent, self-sustaining, equal citizen. So let's see if we can ask Ruth Bader Ginsburg what she meant. If we say, Ruth, what exactly are you saying? She's saying, I know that abortion kills the child in the womb. But you understand, the woman has interests. The woman has certain desires, certain goals. And we understand there's a conflict between the child in her womb and what the child in her womb would want and what this woman would want. But it's even worse than that, you see. This is Ruth Bader Ginsburg talking to us. If the woman doesn't have the right to kill the child in her womb, she will lose her autonomous charge of her full life's course. She's autonomous, and she must control her own life's course. If she has to have a child, she can't do that anymore, you see. What if she wants to be an astronaut? Can she be an astronaut if she has a child? You know, well, you might have, at some point down the road, maybe she could. But that's going to create a problem, isn't it? This child is constraining her autonomy. That's what Ruth Bader Ginsburg is saying. Indeed, she will lose her ability to stand in relation to man and society and the state as this independent, self-sustaining, equal citizen if she has this child. So there you have both of the ideas. autonomous charge over full life's course, and equal standing in relation to a man. Autonomy, equality of the sexes. Let me give you clear definitions of them. What is autonomy? Autonomy is underived or independent existence. It is to exist independently. Now, if I just asked you, do you exist independently? What would you say? Anybody? Does anybody want to say, I exist independently? What are you dependent upon? Go ahead, somebody raise your hand.
The grace of God.
You're dependent upon the grace of God. What else are you dependent upon? Did somebody say my mom? Did somebody say my mom? Well played if you did. Did you say that? You said my mom. Yeah. An honest man among us, right? Praise the Lord. You are manifestly dependent upon all sorts of things. You don't have an underived existence. You understand? And this is really a fascinating thing that Ruth Bader Ginsburg said. What she is really saying is the woman can't be God if she has a child. Because self-existence, autonomy, is a quality that God himself possesses. God is the one who is self-existent and dependent upon no one. That's called the aseity of God. That's A-S-E-I-T-Y, the aseity of God. R.C. Sproul once talked about this attribute of God, his self-existence, and this is what he said. We have the idea of self-existence, or what we call in theology, the concept of aseity. When I see that word on a blackboard, when I see it in a textbook, I know that the vast majority of people in the pew have never heard of the word, and it is so obscure and esoteric, they don't care about hearing about the word. But I have to tell you, honestly and personally, when I see that word, I get chills up my spine. Because in that one little word is captured all the glory of the perfection of God's being. What makes God different from you and me, and different from the stars, the earthquakes, and any creaturely thing is that God and God alone has aseity. God and God alone exists by his own power. He exists by his own power. Think it through for a minute. Do you exist by your own power? Now, you're all Christians and you kind of have your staple answer, right? You're like, well, we know we don't. But let's think it through for a minute. I mean, isn't the blood circulating through your system? Okay. What's causing that? It's in your heart, right? Boom, boom, boom. Aren't you kind of like a self-contained system? Can't you get through like the next couple hours at least? You could find some scrap somewhere. Maybe some of you older ones have a job. Go bum a few dollars off of an older brother. Well, that would make you dependent, wouldn't it? So that won't work. Can't you live for a little bit? Breathe in, breathe out. This is the way that we think if we're just like rank materialists. But the answer is, you're not actually causing your heart to beat. The Bible says, in him we live and move and have our being. The only way you're existing is because of God. It's kind of like when you say that log in the fire is burning, okay? It's on fire, but is the log the fire? No. The fire is the fire. That's God and his existence and his life. And the only way that you will be on fire as a log is if that fire touches you, if it's on you. And so it is with your very existence. You exist like a log burns. If you don't have the fire, there's no burning log. If God is not actively kind toward you to give you existence, you would cease to be in this very moment. You are not autonomous. And you're not the one who directs your full life's course. And this is exactly what Ruth Bader Ginsburg said is put in jeopardy if a woman has a child. She can no longer control her life. So that's autonomy and how it's informing the abortion issue. If you would say, what's one reason, what's one way I would articulate the reason for which women would go and contract some kind of doctor to kill the child in their womb? They truly want to control their future and their destiny. And they want to do so autonomously. We had that bad idea, and it manifests itself in saying, I will go to the greatest of lengths in order to maintain that principle. And I'm saying it's a principle that we should have never had in the first place. Now let's talk about the equality principle. That's there in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's quote. If she has this child, we have to understand what's put in jeopardy is her ability to stand as an equal citizen in relation to man. Now, I might ask you first, is that true? Is Ruth Bader Ginsburg right about that? If a woman has a child, does she lose her ability to stand as an equal citizen in relation to a man? Raise your hand if you say, no, I think she can have a baby and still stand as an equal citizen in relation to man. Raise them high. High. All right, put them down. Raise your hand if you didn't raise your hand. Raise them high. Aha. My seniors know that I like to do this. This is very good. Very good. Put your hands down. There's only a few of you. The Minority Report agrees with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And here's the news break. The Minority Report is right. This is why it's important that we talk about this kind of thing. When the woman has the child, what does the woman need to do to the child? Nurse the child, right? Can the man nurse the child? No, he manifestly cannot. But while she's busy tending to that child, is she as well suited to go get the job at Bootsers as the guy who is her same age? No, she's not. If you were working at Bootsers and a guy shows up and he's like, I don't have to spend time nursing this infant, that kind of thing. I can be here all day long, no breaks for that kind of thing. And the lady showed up and she had great capacity. She could barista just as good as he could. But she said, I've got this child with me. Can I keep him like behind the counter? Can I care for him when he cries? And can you give me a break when I need to put him down for a nap, change the diapers and such? Who are you going to hire? Honestly, who are you going to hire? You feel social pressures to say, well, I mean, whatever. No, you would hire the man. You see, there is something that absolutely changes when a woman has a child, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg understood that. And she claimed that that was high injustice. And I'm going to tell you that's not high injustice. That's simply the way that the world works. That's the way God has actually designed it to work. So we need to, this is like a Sons of Issachar thing, we need to be smart enough to know that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has a point, and then we need to demonstrate how she's missing the point. This is the equality of the sexes idea. What do I mean by equality? What is equality? Well, this is an Oxford English Dictionary definition of equality: a relation between two quantities or other mathematical expressions stating that the two are the same. The two are the same. Are men and women the same? No, they are not. And all of this is breaking down in our society. Actually, the 1964 Civil Rights Act says that you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of sex. That's male and female. Now, you hear the word discriminate, and it sounds like be mean. So you're not allowed, and that's, of course, you are not allowed to be mean on the basis of sex. That's true, we agree. You're not allowed to be mean to ladies because they're ladies, and you're not allowed to be mean to men because they're men. But are you allowed to acknowledge that that indeed is a man? And are you allowed to acknowledge that that indeed is a woman? You know, there was actually a law that was established in Fort Collins, Colorado, that said men could walk around with their shirts off, but women couldn't. We would say it's a pretty good law. They were sued. They said, you know what, there was a Civil Rights Act back in 1964 that said you are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of sex. You are not allowed to make a law that women can't do what men can do because you're discriminating on the basis of sex. Men can walk around with their shirts off, then women should be able to walk around with their shirts off. According to the statute, according to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Now you see how dumb that is. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, actually. We are living in a society now that has bought into this equality of the sexes, claiming that men and women are the same thing. Now, men and women are both created in the image of God. Praise the Lord for that. But man is the glory of God, the Bible says, and woman is the glory of man. And that is, women are the glory of God, which means there are going to be certain things that are appropriate for the glory of God, and there's going to be certain things that are appropriate for the glory of man. It's not about one being better than the other, but it's about acknowledging the distinctions that exist. Indeed, an inequality, a difference. It's not a perfect equal sign. We are not the same kind of thing. Let me give you another example of some of the bad things that have happened in our society because of this notion of the equality of the sexes. This folly can be seen in a 1996 Supreme Court case regarding the Virginia Military Institute. Now, you can hear in the name, the Virginia Military Institute existed to train up soldiers who would fight in the military. But it was only for men. And they were sued, and the Virginia Military Institute had an idea. They said, okay, we've got the Men's Virginia Military Institute, and there are women that are wanting to get into the Men's Virginia Military Institute. So we're going to start a Women's Virginia Military Institute where we will train the women to go fight. So we'll have the Men Fight Institute and the Women Fight Institute. But that wasn't enough. And here comes Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg again. I'm going to read you part of a Supreme Court case opinion written by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Virginia Military Institute produces its citizen soldiers through an adversative or doubting model of education, which features physical rigor, mental stress, absolute equality of treatment, absence of privacy, minute regulation of behavior, and indoctrination in desirable values. Now, men, you think that's a good plan for raising up soldiers? Yeah, you like that? Ladies, any of you want to join that club? Good. She goes on. As one commandment of cadets describes it, the adversative model dissects the young student and makes him aware of his limits and capabilities so that he knows how far he can go with his anger, how much he can take under stress, exactly what he can do when he is physically exhausted. Virginia Military Institute cadets live in Spartan barracks where surveillance is constant and privacy non-existent. They wear uniforms, eat together in the mess hall, and regularly participate in drills. Entering students are incessantly exposed to the rat line, an extreme form of the adversative model, comparable in intensity to Marine Corps boot camp. Tormenting and punishing the rat line bonds new cadets to their fellow sufferers, and when they have completed the 7-month experience, to their former tormentors, the ones who were punishing them in the rat line. Now, ladies, you have to understand, guys are weird. And while there's a part of us that would go like, I'm not going to do that. That sounds hard. There's like 90% of us that say like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And the guy that was tormenting you for however long the 7-month project was, you end up like being really good friends with him at the end. That's the idea. Now, I want you to listen to how Ruth Bader Ginsburg continued in this particular argument. She says, the district court even allowed that some women may prefer the Virginia Military Institute method to the methodology a woman's college might pursue. Okay, so they weren't satisfied with the women's college, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg is the Supreme Court justice. She's saying the lower court, well, they acknowledge that some women may prefer the rat line. Some women, can you imagine a particular lady that might like that kind of experience? Yeah, you probably can. Some women at least would want to attend if they had the opportunity. And this lower district court recognized some women are capable of all the individual activities required of the Virginia Military Institute cadets. Now, is that true? Could you find one woman that could make it through the rat line? What do you say? One woman? You could probably find it. You probably could. Could you find a woman who would be interested in doing it? Yeah. I mean, not many, but maybe one. So she goes on, the question is whether the state can constitutionally deny to women who have the will and the capacity. Could the state deny them the training and attendant opportunities that the Virginia Military Institute uniquely affords? In other words, we want the real experience of the Virginia Military Institute men's group, not some little secondary women's military training. And you have no basis upon which to deny us access, because we could find a woman who would both want to experience that and who could handle it. On what basis would you say she couldn't get in? Excuse me, sir, I have the GPA required for this institute. Yes, we noticed that. Excuse me, sir, I have the desire and I have great recommendations. I can handle it. What do you say to her? Yes, I know you say no. I'm saying why, you misogynist. Anyone? She's not a man, and that's a man's duty. So much for the equality of the sexes. You're exactly right, by the way. You understand, you have to say, well, dear, you are not for this. You are a distinctly different creature, uniquely inclined to be able to make it through the rat line. Granted, different than most of the other creatures that are like you, the females. But you have a certain telos, we call it, a purpose. And it is not to go and to fight wars. That's not what it is. And it's actually on that basis, not merely on the basis of your will, not merely on the basis of your capability. Autonomy, equality of the sexes. So here's my point. Those ideas fuel abortion, because indeed, if we're going to buy into the idea of somehow being self-existent, well, she's not going to be able to continue to provide for herself if she's caring for the child. She is very clearly going to need someone to be caring for her. The Christians say that's not a problem because that's the way that God designed the thing to work. So we reject autonomy. And yes, she is not going to be equal in every sense of the term. There's not going to be this equality of the sexes if she has a child. I mean, the very fact that she can have a child is a denial of the equality of the sexes, because men can't do it. But these ideas are both widely spread in our nation. You need to understand that. You are a minority who would claim these things that I'm telling you. So how are we going to eradicate the abortion thing? I'm going to give you some practical here, and then we're going to have a Q&A. You need to show the beauty and the fruitfulness of rejecting autonomy and rejecting the equality of the sexes. That's your job. In place of human autonomy, you need to acknowledge God's autonomy or God's aseity and your dependence upon him. Embracing what it means that in him we live and move and have our being. Do you really get that? Like, here's my challenge to you, Christian. Do you get that in him you live and move and have your being? And here's a question that would help you know whether you got it. Have you genuinely prayed today? Have you genuinely done it? Like your spirit, your soul, have you said, God, thank you for keeping me alive? And give me this day my daily bread, because I receive it as something from your hand, as one who is dependent upon you. Have you done that, or have you just operated kind of just taking what's there? A genuine dependence, a genuine acknowledgement of God. We would talk about the coram Deo, to live before the face of God. Have you done that? Because it's beautiful to do that. When you do that, it's compelling. Right now, the thing that is compelling out there in the world that they spend all their time advancing is the idea of a woman's autonomy. Miss Independent. Miss can get it done herself. Miss I don't need a man. Miss fill in the blank. Have you shown the beauty of what it means to be a creature, one who is dependent upon this God? There's a poem called Invictus. It's by William Ernest Henley. This is what it says. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. I love in the first verse, he gives a swiping pass to whatever gods may be. Whatever gods may be. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced or cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Raucous applause at your commencement address. Be the master of your fate. Be the captain of your soul. Autonomy. Autonomy. It's sold to you in 1,000 ways. Now be strong and hold your head high. Be bloodied but unbowed. But learn to do it as a Christian. Learn to do it giving thanks. If you've ever held up, like the chant, sometimes this comes out in the sport chants, if you've ever held up your hands and been had some kind of chant that said no limits, you understand it's an attribute of deity, which you don't have. And a child is going to limit her, isn't it? It's going to prevent her from being able to do some things that she wanted to do. But she's been taught that she has no limits, and thus the child has to go. You see? Have we imbibed it? So learn to live trusting, depending upon the God who is self-existent. And the second is this rejection of destroying equality. Go tell people that's your mission. It's my mission to destroy the equality between the sexes. You're going to get in trouble for saying that. This idea is messier. If we wanted to go straight equality, wouldn't it be so much easier? You'll find this when you're a parent. You just give each one peppermint. And you give each one the exact same amount of food. And you give each one the exact same amount of time on the video game. And you give each one. Wouldn't that it's so ordered, it's so equal. There it is. But it's also dumb. And it doesn't work. Remember, not equal in every sense of the term. Men, you have to discover what it means to be a man, right? And that doesn't mean putting down women. Women, you have to understand what it means to be a woman, right? And that doesn't mean trying to rule over the men. You have to find those qualities that mark being man and woman, and how God has designed this world to work with His image being expressed in both men and women. What are those qualities? What are those characteristics? And put those on, and don't feel like you're getting gypped if you ladies can't do all the things that men can do, and you men can't do all the things that the women can do, that you don't get the privileges that are associated with each one. Because again, we are distinct, and that is self-evident in when the children come. The child needs a father and a mother, and you are to show the beauty of those things. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop, and we have just a few minutes for questions.
Okay, I know this is not like combat related, so it's not necessarily connected, but what's your opinion of like women in collegiate sports who are like being forced to like, perform at like their highest athletic ability, but it's also kind of like how you were saying with like the route line and like, you really, it's like a hard thing that they're going through. What is your just opinion of like collegiate, like women's collegiate sports?
All right, you mentioned the woman performing at her highest athletic ability, and I want to start by saying a woman should always perform at her highest athletic ability. Don't step on the court if you're not ready to play at your highest athletic ability. You should never be playing at less than your highest athletic ability. But your point is more, what about like, women in like full combat sports? I think sports are great for ladies. You should do them. You're going to have to be tough. Toughness is not a quality of manhood, as if women aren't supposed to do it. Any man that has a wife that has had a child manifestly knows that women are tough. And that has to be cultivated, and that's cultivated through sports. But of course, there are sports that women just shouldn't play because it's not for them, like football. So it's not so much about the level, whether it's at college, but it would be more about the nature of the sport. And there's wisdom to make your decisions, right? But I'll at least say football's not a wise sport for a lady to play, nor like boxing.
Do you think the issue of ectopic pregnancies and how they have to be treated?
Yeah, extremely, extremely rare, and then have to be discussed with pastors and doctors on a particular practical level. What's going on?
Can you just repeat the question?
Ectopic pregnancy often comes up in the cases of abortion. It's just in a categorically different spot than the normal abortions. And so I recommend, part of it, what I recommend is that it doesn't get brought into the abortion conversation because it's just not that. It's obviously something that's deadly to the woman, and then you have to figure out in detail what exactly how you're going to navigate it.
So you said that men and women are not equal, but you mean that they're not equal in purpose. But there is another meaning of equal, right? Because there is also equality of value. But then you could say men and women are equal in that they have the same value.
The thing I want to say is that they are both created in the image of God. And so value of being created in the image of God, yes, right? But if we have to kill a guy, they're not both equally valuable to that end, right? And if we have to nurse a baby, they're not both equally valuable to that end. So both are created in the image of God. Praise the Lord, and make sure you maintain that, particularly as you acknowledge the distinctions.
Do you think that women have any role to play in the military or any first responder service?
I just say non-combat. So the military is broad and all of that. There's going to be nurses and all sorts of offices and positions and such. No combat. Any other questions? I think we did it.